I know this is going to be hard to imagine because
Mm.
there's a lot of doubters out there when it comes to treating narcissistic people, but I've worked with narcissistic people for a very
You,
long time. They're not easy to treat, okay? They're
right.
not easy to treat. They don't all heal. You don't get sustainable change with everyone you work with. It takes a lot. But with the ones where I have seen meaningful, lasting change over many years, it's so rewarding because what
Right.
you see is
That,
someone who has spent their lifetime working so hard to prove themselves in order to compensate for this deep inner insecurity that they carry, this deep, driving, demanding inner critic. Suddenly, because their core emotional experience has been altered, where they can actually feel like being an average person, being a human, being a lovable child who's unconditionally loved and accepted,
hmm
being able to really feel that means I don't have to perform so hard anymore. I don't have to be the center of attention. I don't have to have the spotlight. I don't have to act like, you know, the know-it-all in every situation. I can kind of just be. It mitigates the shame they've carried around in that heavy backpack for years. And without shame, what happens? Well, now you're suddenly available to understand the world of someone else. You couldn't listen to your partner talking about her upsets and her hurts and her disappointments because it was all about you. I'm the bad guy, bad guy, bad guy.
right.
Now that the shame has been mitigated, you can say, I did some bad stuff.
Right.
And I can really understand why it was very hurtful to my partner. I know listeners will think, well, that would never happen with the narcissist I lived with, and it may not. So, no need to defend on that. But it is possible under the right conditions, with the right elements, the right therapy, the right therapist, that sometimes change can occur. And the beauty of correcting biased emotional experiences for anyone is that you get liberated from these traps, these patterns that have been so well grooved and so automatically operated within the brain
Right.
without question. Now, suddenly you're kind of back at the wheel again, making decisions about your own life.
You know, when people ask me, can narcissists change? Can they get better?
Mm,
And I give my standard personality disorder response, which is mostly not. However, and I don't say this for people with antisocial personality disorder, but for someone with narcissistic personality disorder, I said there are legitimate treatment programs. And I always bring up yours because,
mm,
from what I know, that is the most heavily researched and validated approach that has yielded results. But what I say is if you can't get your partner to know or admit they have a problem,
right.
then they're not going to see therapy as an option. And they're going to find a therapist who will, affirm them, probably not even know they're pathologically narcissistic.
Hmm.
But what I'm hearing you say, it validates my 1%. And now I don't know if it's 1%, but it's all based upon if you don't know you have a problem, you can't find a therapist. And then the other thing I say is, let's say they do have that moment of clarity. The treatment, it's intensive therapy. It takes up to a couple of years, if not longer. Am I correct? And
No, you're absolutely correct. There's three things that are necessary, and this is why it doesn't work most of the time. I
mhm,
think number one reason is because most therapists don't want to work with them or they miss it completely, as you pointed out. They miss it. They get caught up in the charm, they get
yeah,
caught up in all the denial, they get caught up in the intelligent banter and
mhm,
intellectualization. They get caught up in the covert victim, I'm the victim,
right,
right? So it's easy to miss. I'm not blaming anybody. I do think it's the most challenging population to sit with. I think it's the most
right.
activating one. So we get triggered, our schemas get triggered, we go
You bet.
into our protective modes, and then we're not
Correct.
available to be present. You have to be very sturdy, very present, very persistent if you're going to be effective. So you need a sturdy, persistent, present therapist. You need to have a good model that knows how to wind its way into the deep, dark
Yeah,
crevices of the one's being and experience. And you need leverage. So
right.
if the narcissist doesn't have any consequences they're facing, they're
hmm
not going to come to therapy, number one. And even if they do, you have to keep that leverage high or they're going to drop out in the early days. So
Yeah.
leverage and keeping it high and transferring it into the therapy relationship where their connection to me becomes critically important to them. So they
Right.
want to keep coming back. Even if in the
And
beginning
leverage.
it's only to try to make me wrong, they'll keep coming back. So leverage, sturdy therapist, effective treatment model.
It's my opinion that most therapists begin their career, and Alice Miller talked about this, the book that had the most influence on me, and now I can't remember the title,
The drama of the gifted child.
Trauma of the Gifted
Yeah.
Child, yeah.
Yeah.
And what most therapists, nurses or caretakers, any profession that is very compassionate and sympathetic and empathetic, it's born out of the type of attachment experience that adult codependence experience. So my presumption that has been proven right by my observation is around 75% of people that go into wanting to be a psychotherapist have the type of wounding that Alice Miller talks about, that this caretaking, this listening,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
survive by
Mm-hmm.
developing these skills and this hypersensitivity. And so if a person believes that, then 75% of the people in the career start off as either what I would call with SLDD or some lesser version. Then they are going to have that unconscious bias, which could be reactive. They get me nervous. I don't like them, which is my thing. I'm aware of that. Or it's like, oh, they're so charming, likable, or I'm so powerless. And so to your sturdy comment, I want to just add someone who, if they do have some level of self-love deficiency, deficit disorder, and I have a whole chapter in my book that's called the Relationship Compatibility Continuum that says there's gradations of this. And they do the work I have done, and I think most therapists do that work past this. That is the sturdiness that
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine
Absolutely.
someone who does the work like you to be anything less than that, because if you were traumatized, neglected, abused, deprived, as a child, then it would have to be activating even if you didn't know it.
Even if you
And
weren't, even if it wasn't that extreme, Ross, because you can have subjugation, self-sacrifice schemas even from more subtler versions of that,
yeah,
as I did. And I write in my book about all the mistakes I made in the beginning by just giving
right.
in, by feeling so overwhelmed and intimidated, by apologizing when I didn't do anything wrong, by getting defensive, by giving in to demands, by ignoring criticisms, by,
Right.
just listening to their very entertaining stories because they can be. So, all the things that are not going to do the central thing, which is to meet needs. And the need is to set
Right.
limits, and the need is to confront and hold accountable. And you
Yeah.
can't do that if you're not coming from a place of strength and realness and sturdiness. So, yes, I don't
So
fault any
we
therapist
agree.
for being triggered by them. I don't fault any therapist for that. What I do, I train therapists all over the world on this topic, is work on you. Give yourself that privilege, give yourself that chance to reconcile your own schemas in here,
Right.
escort your own vulnerability out of the room so that you are sitting in the room as a healthy, sturdy, readied, not perfect, not robotic, but you're real. You're a human in the room. You're ready to take on the challenge of being a good parent to this very unruly child that's coming in, when you have a narcissist.
Any therapists are listening, I have to say that 75% indictment, I needed to finish off by saying
Yeah,
the people that stick around and get healthy, they do what we were taught to do. We go to therapy. We
yeah,
look at what
exactly.
happened to us. And so if I am right about 75%, the ones that stick around that are good therapists, that percentage shrinks over time.
Yeah,
Um,
you're absolutely right. And between you and me, I wouldn't want to be with a therapist who hasn't been in therapy, right?
exactly.
I mean, I do think you really do have to walk the talk here because there is
Right.
something so beautiful about the process of unraveling and deconstructing and reorganizing so that we
Mhm.
can be healthy and well and believe in what we're sharing with others.
Well, please tell my viewers and listeners where they can learn more about you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And we could talk for hours, obviously, but Thank you for sharing your wonderful contributions. Thank you for having me. If you want to hear more about my work, have access to my book or my podcasts or anything else, Wendy Behary, you can type my name in your browser or
Yeah.
disarmingthenarcissist.com.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of cool, even though the coolness is kind of worn off. Is people will go, well, "How do I find out your book?" I'll just say, "Type my name into the type," and then what I say, um, my joke is, well, first of all, I say, "Type my name and you'll find it," and then I say, "If that picture of me holding the numbers, just ignore that." And of course, more often than not, people laugh, and the ones that actually take it seriously. But 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 thank you, and
Thank you too, Ross. Thank you so
let's
much.
let's keep in touch.
Let's do. Take good care.
You too.
Bye.